Hi guys, and welcome to Crypto Exposed. Okay guys, I got a post here by the Hedera community, and for me this is just one of the examples as to why I think in the long term Hedera is going to overtake Ethereum in my opinion. So I think, to be honest with you, I can't obviously say this for sure, but when I read this thread I kind of feel like they had Ethereum in mind, to be honest with you, but you'll understand as we go through it. But yeah, to me this is where, like, when I do look at Hedera, I do think this is where, when it's all said and done and we start getting to like more of like utility phase rather than just like what's the number 2 crypto and that kind of thing, like when we're actually getting to the point of actually using these networks for their technical attributes rather than who's got the bigger, you know, the bigger client base or the most liquidity. I think this is where Hedera is going to, in my opinion, outshine Ethereum. So let's go through the post. So the Hedera community say, gas fee spikes can completely break user experience overnight. Imagine trying to run microtransactions, IoT data streams, or enterprise applications when a sudden network congestion event turns a 0.05 cent fee into a $50 gas war. That's a deal breaker for mainstream adoption. Enter Hedera. Transaction fees are explicitly fixed in USD, standardized at 0.0001 cent for a standard crypto transfer, and paid in HBAR. Because the fiat cost is locked, developers and businesses never have to guess what scaling will actually cost them. And then you can see in the post that they actually have a Hedera fee calculator. So, what becomes possible here that fails elsewhere? High frequency IoT telemetry and machine-to-machine micropayments. If a device needs to pay for transactions every few seconds, but doesn't have a standard cost to budget for, variable gas fees can quickly drain the wallet. Future Web3 gaming. Web3 games that rely on thousands of microtransactions, in brackets trading items, updating player states, cosmetic markets, etc., cannot survive on chains where a single click costs more than the item itself. Predictable sub-cent pricing makes true Web3 gaming viable. Enterprise and supply chain tracking. Global supply chains track millions of individual items. If an enterprise has to budget for fluctuating gas prices to log checkpoints, it creates a massive barrier to adoption. Fixed pricing means predictable budgeting at an enterprise scale. End of thread. Which of these applications of Hedera's fixed fees and sub-cent pricing do you think will prove the most important to the future of digital assets? Okay, so I completely understand this, right? And I've explained my experience with Ethereum before. So look, I will just say this so you don't think that I'm actually just being biased here as a HBAR holder. When I got into the crypto industry, right, and just started dabbling with crypto myself personally, I didn't have HBAR straight away. I was actually using Ethereum before I even picked up any HBAR. And I personally, my experience with Ethereum, it just wasn't good. It just wasn't. Like, don't get me wrong, it was great in terms of the opportunities that was on there, because there was a lot of DeFi projects, so there was a lot of opportunities to make money on there. But in terms of actually using the network, it was not an enjoyable experience. And I've told this story before, but Bored Apes, which was a really popular NFT that came out in the last bull run, when that came out, a lot of people went crazy over it. It really did, it really blew up. And I remember someone spent, it was either $3,000 or $5,000 trying to mint a Bored Ape, and they wasn't successful, and that was on Ethereum. So imagine spending $3,000 or $5,000, but you didn't even get the NFT minted in the end either. So you spent that money and you just lost it. That's how crazy it was on Ethereum when it was during a bull market. There was so much congestion that, the fees were just, they were crazy and you wouldn't always get through. So with Ethereum as well, you can actually pay more. You can actually pay a higher amount in hope that you'll get more likely the payment to be released, to be successful. But again, that's not great, right? Like, you don't want to have to pay more, especially when the fees are already ridiculous. Like, I've said this before, but I actually used to have like a thing called a GUI tracker or whatever, because GUI was what the gas was for Ethereum at the time, and it would tell you like what prices the GUI was. When the GUI was like high, it would mean that it's going to be high to do transactions, and when it was low, it meant it would be cheaper. And I used to like put an alarm on like during the middle of the night so I could wake up in the early hours of the night just to do some transactions on Ethereum because it would be cheaper. That is not ideal, right? I've never had that with Hedera. I've never had that with HBAR. Like, I just do the transaction whenever I want to do it, and it's so cheap that it just doesn't matter. It's just there. And so, looking at all these different types of use cases, you can see how each one, that type of thing with the, Ethereum congestion and, how expensive it can get, it's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable. So, I don't know, like, how personally, this is just my perspective, I don't know how Ethereum could have a long-term, a long-term future if it stays that way. Now, I have heard that there's been some upgrades to try and make it cheaper, but I'm not sure if these are like layer 2s. So that's the only thing I will add into that. But this is where I talk about, like, Hedera just has it organically, just naturally, right? They've not had to do like updates to try and lower the price and things like that. Ethereum, the network is just already the way it is. And I don't know if people know this, but Ethereum, as it stands, is actually like a prototype. That's what I have to keep doing so many updates to it. What actually happened with Ethereum was they put out a coin offering, an ICO, and they got way more traction than they expected. Like, they got a lot of investment, and due to that, they were then under the pressure of the investors, right? Because they was like, well, we've all put our money in, we want the network, right? And it wasn't quite ready. So they didn't have the amount of time that they wanted to really tweak the network to how they wanted it before they released it. But because of the pressure of having such a big result from the ICO, they just kind of rushed it out. And that's why they have to keep doing all these updates to try and improve the network, because it wasn't 100% ready before they actually released it. And so that actually obviously helps you understand as to why it is the way it is. But long term, I don't see that being viable. Like, I don't see companies, even if, Ethereum has got the biggest liquidity base there and it's the number 2 crypto, I can't see people saying, I'm willing to endure these fees and all this volatility in the gas fees. And sometimes the gas fees not even going through due to congestion. I'm not willing to risk that just because it's the number 2 crypto or because it's got the bigger liquidity base. I'd rather go to a network that hasn't got as big of a liquidity base, but it's more reliable. It's faster, it's cheaper. You're just going to naturally want to do that, right? Because these types of things that they're talking about here, the things that they've been mentioning, these are things that can all scale in a big way. And if you're talking about trying to do that on Ethereum, like, that could get crazy. That could get crazy. If one, like, for example, when they're talking about like microtransactions, if you've got like AI agents doing microtransactions every day, what if like 90% of those transactions fail because it's during a bull run? And then you still look at your costs and you see like, oh my God, we've spent like thousands of dollars trying to do these transfers and literally only 10% of them have gone through. And we've lost all that money. You're not going to be happy with that. That's just not going to be, it's not going to be acceptable. Not when you've got other networks out there, you've got other choices. You wouldn't have that with Hedera. Hedera can scale, and because this is where I say even with Hedera in terms of it's unique to other networks, the fact that it's just fixed in USD, because even other networks, like, they just fix it to the token value, and so that can still fluctuate. Now, I will just add in the caveat that because other networks do usually, they're a lot cheaper than Ethereum, it's not going to make a huge difference because they're still very, very cheap. But still, if you're a company and you want to, plan how much you're going to be spending in costs and things like that for doing certain things and whatnot, with Hedera, you can literally plan it to the T, because you can actually use the fee calculator. So you can say, okay, this is how many transfers we'll be doing a day, times that by a month, times that into a year, and then they can literally get how much that would cost them in USD to do. So then they can literally just put the budget for it, and that's it. They're done. You can't really do that with other networks. Do you see what I mean? So this is where Hedera, not just in regards to Ethereum, it has something unique to a lot of other networks in that regard too. And that could actually make companies a lot more open to using Hedera, because they can plan. They can actively plan how much their fees are going to be and manage the business a lot more accurately. So I looked at this and straight away I just thought of Ethereum, because I've used Ethereum personally, and I just know it wasn't a pleasurable experience at all. And just a quick addition to that one, I'll just add about Ethereum that I had. I did a transaction when it was quite busy, and I had to wait like 3 hours for the transaction to go through. So I was sitting there for 3 hours, just keep checking every now and again. Like at one point, I thought I might have done it wrong. I kept checking, and I was like, okay, it looks the same. You know, the address looks the same from what I can see, but the transaction just wasn't going through. So I just didn't know what was happening. It got there eventually, but 3 hours. Like, I don't want to be sitting around for 3 hours. Like, if you know how nerve-wracking it is doing a transfer of money with crypto, you'll know what I mean, because it's very nerve-wracking. Because if you get just like a character wrong, so if you just say you take a wallet account number, right, and you put it in, if you just accidentally delete a character, that's all you need to do. If you just get a character wrong, like let's just say you accidentally delete a character as you do that, it won't say that the transaction's failed or block the transaction. It will just send it to whatever it is. But if you accidentally delete a character, it just basically means the money goes into a black hole and it's gone. So it's very nerve-wracking, because you need to make sure that you've got it correct, and you've not accidentally deleted a character or missed a character off or anything like that, or you've accidentally added a character as you was pasting it in, like a typo or anything like that. So you're very nervous. So if you're there waiting like hours for it to go through and you're not sure, that's horrible. It's mental torture, right? But with Hedera, it's going to happen instantly. So you'll know straight away whether it's right or wrong. And you're not going to be worrying, you'll know instantly. So it's this kind of things that I just don't think companies are going to want to deal with on a bigger scale. And I just think in every single point that they made here, gaming, microtransactions, enterprise and supply chain tracking, all these types of different scenarios that they're talking about, it's valid. Because especially with gaming, as I was saying, like imagine you're just buying like a skin for a game, but to actually do the transaction to like pay for the gas fee, it was more than actually buying the skin. You know what I mean? Like you end up paying more just for the gas fee. Like who's going to want to do that? And who's going to have the money, especially when you're talking about kids? Because they might be just using like the pocket money, right? And like if the parents say like, well, how much have you just spent doing this? And it's like, oh, well, the skin itself that I needed for my character, that was, like $3, but, it cost $20 to do the transfer in the end. You're going to be like, well, that's crazy, right? Like they're going to say no, like, because in the end that still cost us $23. So no, you're going to have to, calm that down. So there's going to be limits to this in every factor. And so I just think when Hedera are talking about this, I completely agree. And that's why I say long term, whether it's people, developers, companies, whatever, Ethereum might be the number 2 cryptocurrency. It's got that first mover advantage and whatnot, but I just can't see it keeping that place when you see the issues that it can have, and it just can't scale. Like I just can't see companies sticking around with that. I don't see it personally. So I thought this was very relevant, and I do think long term, this is why I do think Hedera will surpass Ethereum overall. That's my opinion. We'll see, but these points that they're making, it just makes sense. It really does just make sense, and I can't imagine companies wanting to stick with Ethereum knowing that there's those kind of problems. I just don't see how that would work. So yeah, I thought this was very relevant, so I thought I'd share this with you. But once again, just showing you why Hedera, it definitely has a chance to really take that spot, to be honest with you, with Ethereum. I think its days long term are numbered. I don't know how long it's going to take, but I think overall, eventually, there's so much better options out there, and Hedera definitely being one of them. I just think they're going to go elsewhere personally. But I'll leave it there. If you did like this video, please remember to like, comment and subscribe so you can be updated for future HBAR content. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you can be alerted on when I do drop a new video. Thank you very much for watching this, and I'll see you all on the next one.